Hello knockouts, Tonya TKO here. And right now I am in Lagos, Nigeria. I am very tipsy right now. So this is the drunk history version of the slave trade from Nigeria. This is the daily vlog that I'm doing, and I'm pre-recording it because I have tried the Wi-Fi and I've also tried I've tried the Wi-Fi and I've also tried, what is this thing called? I've tried the data from my phone, but neither one of them are able to support a live broadcast right now. It's a Monday evening in Lagos, Nigeria. I came out here to get in touch with my roots. I collaborated with another vlogger on creating a journey to Badagry. And so let's just, how did I become tipsy, right? So we went and it was hot in the sun and I guess I was parched, but I had been drinking water. And then afterwards we decided to celebrate by going to a lounge. And in the lounge, inside of the lounge, I had like this pina colada. I was thirsty. I drank it quickly. And then there was a what do you call this? One of the crew was drinking an Origin and told me to try it. It's basically some spirits with African herbs, Lord mercy. And that combination in and of itself has had me messed up since the moment that I was drinking those two, right? And it's been more than an hour and I've been hoping that the feeling will come down, but I'm still messed up. And I don't know how people like this drunk feeling. I've never been drunk before. This is the closest that I've been to drunk. I don't like it. It's not a good feeling. And then, and then you feel, one of the things that I felt is I felt a plethora of all different types of emotions I didn't want to feel. Typically, when I sip rum, it's a good time, but this is not a good time. It's a sad time. I'm being confronted by insecurities and all different types of stuff. Demons speaking to me and calling me all sorts of names. Negative self-talk. It's not a good time. So nonetheless, speaking of all different types of emotions, I felt every emotion today visiting the vestiges of the slave trade on African soil. And for all of the people, oh God, listen, for all of the people in my comments who are talking about, because I'm talking about how my ancestors were captured and sold, and people are like, oh, they weren't captured. And I'm like, yes, they were. Whether they were captured by Africans or Europeans, they were still captured. They did not consent. They did not agree. They did not give their permission. They were taken against their will and treated horribly, right? So for the people who were saying that Africans sold other Africans, from what it is that I learned today during the outing is yes, Africans sold other Africans. From what it is that I surmise, it's, and then you know what, and then I'll say this. Let me rewind a little bit. So basically Europeans had started going over to Africa, I said what, the 1500s, right? And then so basically indentured servitude existed in Africa. People serving to serve out their crimes and stuff like that, or debts or whatever, right? So they would do indentured servitude, but the indentured servants were not maltreated and harmed and all this other stuff. They just served out their servitude, and they were not kept in servitude for life. What it is that I can gather is that maybe because that is the system that existed here already, serfdom, that when they were selling human beings to these Europeans, that they didn't know to what extent it would last and perpetuate, right? So this is what I gather. And so basically this is how I gathered things happen. So they came over visiting, and they were looking for spices and selling different things, because back in the days, that was international commerce. You would trade things with other countries, like things that, like, apples can only grow in the cold, like in New York, but then peaches grow in Georgia. So you travel around and you take what's indigenous to your land and you sell it to other people, right? And so the trade began like that, and I believe that, and then also in the book, W.E.B. Du Bois' book, The World in Africa, and if you all know other books that we can read and research up on, that'll be cool, because, why not? The more informed we are, the better, right? And then, so they found that they could get laborers, right? But what came with European chattel slavery was a level of barbarism. Is that for a barber? Or barbarianism? Whatever it is. It came with a level of cruelty that just was unnecessary. Stabbing people, cutting off their limbs, cutting off their genitals, putting bolts, piercing a hole through people's lips and putting a padlock through it. It's like, what? It's like they didn't have to be so cruel. And it's like, I say that in Africa that there was indentured servitude, and maybe they didn't know that it was going to be so cruel, right? But from what it is that I saw, right? What it is that I saw today, personally, on African soil, at the port, there were chambers that Black people were kept in before they were taken off into the boats. And even the condition, the size of the chambers, the lack of ventilation, and all of that other stuff was already cruel. The weight of the chains weighed down around their necks, forcing them to walk in the hot sun, not giving them water, starving them, beating them, chopping off their heads, and all of this other stuff. It began here on this soil. And if there's anything that I can imagine, it's like, okay, well, the Europeans had guns, so there were a lot of different things that contributed. So the Europeans had guns, and they used the invention, I believe it was the printing press, stolen from, I forget who invented the printing press. I believe it was the Chinese, and gunpowder from the Chinese, and iron smelting from the Africans. And they used these stolen technologies, the gunpowder, the iron smelting, and then also later on, when Christianity came in, they used the printing press to purport the propaganda. So from what it is that I gathered, right, the barbarianism, the barbarism started here on the motherland, and it was allowed because of the trading of the goods, which, and then today when I was talking, I was doing, little first-hand vlogs during the situation, like just about my feelings about it. And one of the crew members was like, well, you can't really say that on film that, Africa was also responsible for the perpetuation and the propagation, the promulgation of the slave trade, how it lasted so long, and how it became such a ferocious demand for human beings. They would sell 10 human beings for a bottle of gin. And one of the things that bothered me during the tour is that they were calling these people slaves, but they were not slaves. They were enslaved. And it's like there's a distinction, right? There's a distinction. I don't want to go on and on and on, but what it is that I learned from this history lesson today is that the demand grew larger than, just the people who were indentured and whatnot. And then they started capturing pregnant women, and then they started chaining children, and they would castrate certain men because men, you don't really need a whole bunch of men who are able to procreate. You only need a few because men can spread their seed far and wide. And the slave trade persisted for more than 400 years. From what it is that I'm hearing, it became like, so when they first came over and were, this is the story that they told at the place. Europeans came over and they were out at the dock watching and all this other stuff. And then they just bum rushed the land with their guns, and they were shooting and killing people, and they just overpowered. And then they stole, then they started stealing people. But they had buildings here. So how were they able to have buildings? I don't know. But I know toxic masculinity is somewhere in the mix in there. I know it is. So nonetheless, let me go forward and just sum it up, and I'll tell you about my night last night. The after slave trading was illegalized, I think that's the right word. It was illegalized, made illegal. After it was illegalized in 1862 or 63, something like that. Or after it was illegalized, 1842. I believe in Africa it was made illegal in 1842. So from 1520 to 1842, it was legal, right? And after that, then the missionaries came with their Bibles, and they started teaching Christianity. And you know what? All throughout this tour today, I was angry. I was so angry at just listening to how they sold 10 human beings for a bottle of gin, 40 human beings for an umbrella, 100 human beings for a cannon. And it was like the lack of worth on human life. It's like you didn't know what these people were going to do. Even if you had a certain level of servitude in your own country, you didn't know what these people were going to do with your people once they got them over there. And did I already say, yes, they were captured because they didn't consent to this. They didn't freely go over and say, oh, I consent to living in these conditions, this, that, and the other. But anyway, then the people came with their Bibles. People who looked just like the people who were the enslavers. And one of the biggest insults that I saw today was a picture. It was like a picture. So Christianity was accepted under this agili tree or agisi tree, some sort of tree. And the very first Christmas that they had here, they had these Caucasians, I was going to say white people, but they had them sitting there. So there was like two men and a woman, and they were sitting there in their white linen outfits looking so fresh and clean. And then they had black Africans, they had people behind them with white letters painted on their chest. So one guy had an M and then an ERRY, Mary, and then they had like a big X and then mass, right? And they had human beings posing in these pictures, topless, shirts off in the hot ass sun, taking this damn picture. And these were the people who were quote unquote Christians. Not to mention the hand that Christianity played in the continuation and the justification of the slave trade. Speaking of which, one of the guys on the crew was like, he would love to hear Caucasians' point of view about the slave trade, trying to see the positive side of it. And I'm like, no, I've heard Caucasians' point of view about it. They thought that you were inferior savages and that they were saving you. And so they didn't really see you as a human being, but just one or two steps up from a monkey. But the thing is that the way, people don't even abuse monkeys. They don't even abuse animals the way that, I'm sorry, I'm out of it. They don't even abuse animals the way that human beings were abused during this trade. So nonetheless, after the missionaries brought Christianity, then came the teachers. Then they started teaching the children. And it really makes you, like, seeing it side by side and lining the dates up, really makes you wonder, why were they trusted? The same people who were in the slave trade then came with Bibles, and you trusted their word of what it is that they were talking about. And then you allowed the people who looked like the enslavers, the same descendants, to then teach your children. Malcolm X had a great quote where he was like, I don't remember the quote, but it was a great quote where he was like, don't trust people who mean you harm to teach your children, something like that. I don't know, but Malcolm X had the good quote. You could write it below if I don't find it first. But it was a plethora. Listen, I went through every emotion, and then I didn't feel sadness until we went to go see the king of the area. And we didn't get a chance to see, we didn't get to see the king because you have to write beforehand and submit all of this documentation. But we saw his representatives, and the men got down on the floor and prostrated. I had to get down on my knees, which was cool. It's the culture, the custom of what this world was expected. And I thought it was very interesting to see the African guys prostrate, because this is something that they've obviously done before. They had their own techniques, etc. And so what was I trying to say? Okay, so yeah, so the saddest thing that I saw, I didn't feel the emotion of sadness. Like, anger is one thing. Like I've heard people have gone to Ghana and they've cried, but I don't know if they were crying from anger, because what it is that I felt today was anger, right? But the sadness came when I asked, the king's representative about the slave trade and what role Africa claims, for allowing it to go on for so long. Oh no, that was the first question, but he avoided that question. It was the second question. The second question I asked was about Christianity and why they trusted these people who came over who looked just like the other people. And from what it is that he said, he was basically like, oh, we have to trust them because, he was just going on about how Christianity is so wonderful. And then he was showing off the tree where Christianity was accepted in Africa. And I was just sitting there like, or I was standing there like, oh my goodness. I was just like, wow. It's like the indoctrination is so deep that even today, that we can't see how these tools have come in. Like, how do you trust a person who says that they're Christian, but they also supported barbarianism, and they also turned a blind eye? They turned a blind eye to just the cruel, unjust treatment. And then in the Bible, there are passages that support slaves, quote unquote, obeying their masters. And it was just really interesting, because it's like, I don't know. I feel like I've gone on for some time now, and I want to lay down the feeling of intoxication. And you know what? I think the jet lag, the tiredness could all be combined into that. So last night, I had a really amazing time. The club was so beautiful. It was like nothing that I had ever seen, not even in the States. There were these beautiful lights, and they pulled no stops. It was like everything was just so gorgeous. And the ladies were dressed up in beautiful clothing, and they were looking so pretty, and the men were buying bottles, and it was lovely. I had a really good time last night. And I stayed up way late and didn't get sleep last night, and then went out. And I'm so mad because in the footage, I look awful in the footage. My hair from the sun had come up, like, so my hair is sticking up in the back. It was curled up on the sides. It was just like, I waited so long planning all of this to go get this footage, and then I looked terrible inside the footage. And then me and my intoxicated self was just like so hard on myself for how it is that I looked in the footage. But you know what? I have done my best. I've done my best. But I guess my best wasn't good enough, 'cause you're not standing here. Well, whatever. But I don't know. I don't really feel like going on. I don't feel like editing this video. I don't feel like I have pictures of all of the things that I've been talking about, but I don't feel like editing this video, especially I won't be able to get it up tonight if I do spend time editing it. But listen, I love you all very, very much. There's a lot to ponder and consider. The situation is a complex situation. It's not an easy situation. Because I guess I compare it to Trump and the situation that exists in the United States. So there were some people that voted for Trump. And it's like Trump is still a representative of all of us, right? And during the transatlantic slave trade, were there Africans that participated? But from what it is that I gather, it was very few Africans that participated in the actual allowance of what happened. You know, greedy people, corrupt people, people who don't value human life, people who don't value the lives of their countrymen. And they allowed for this to happen. And then the majority of the people, I'm sure, were against it. However, I don't know. It's like, when history tells itself, history is going to tell the story of how Africans sold other Africans. But what percentage was of people who benefited from it? How did those people's desires represent the desires of the masses? You know, and so I can imagine that it was very few people, elites, who quote unquote benefited. And the rest of the people, I guess out of deference or whatever, went along with it or whatnot. But I don't know. It's hard to think about. It's hard to talk about. It's just, it's difficult. And I am going to go to Ghana. I need to start planning my Ghana trip right now, because I haven't gotten all of my stuff together for Ghana yet. Listen, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you for stopping by and coming and watching this video. I'll try to go live in the morning when the Wi-Fi is doing better. I don't know what's going on with the Wi-Fi and the web signals this evening. I restarted my phone several times, but it's not working. I guess it wasn't meant to work, but I'll get this video up as soon as possible, even if I don't add the footage, which I probably won't. And it's difficult. It's difficult. And it's complex, you know, like, and like the remnants of it are like colorism and all this other stuff that still exists to this day. And it's like, it's not okay. It's not okay. And in the same way that we want America to apologize for the role that it played, I think it's time that African nations who participated in the slave trade also issue apologies for the roles that they played in its perpetuation, and really come together and get to the two sides of the coin to really hash it out and speak with one another and gain some understanding. But it's like, while we're embarrassed, it's like, this is why America's having the problems that it's having right now, where America is on its knees right now because we've never addressed the issues that needed to be addressed. And I believe here in Africa, the issues need to be addressed. And you know, one thing I'm going to tell you, Africans, from the most part, from what it is that I gather, and let me say this before I forget this, I have heard that the country of Ghana has apologized. And I think that's part of the reason that tourism is flourishing there, and it's a different country. But I think that each country that participated in it needs to speak up about their role and really kind of put the pieces together, because people want to make it seem like, oh, these Europeans bum rushed and they did this, but they had buildings. They had buildings on the land. There were people who allowed for it to happen. But nonetheless, right, I was going to say something, but I feel like it's slipping away. I feel like the apologies must come, We must talk. And this is what I was going to say. I remember the Europeans who came over here and teach and taught. You know, this is part of the reason that the national language in Nigeria is English. And in other countries, it's like, in other African countries, it's like French, etc. Because these countries came in and brought their languages, and they brought their teachers. And many Africans just don't know. They don't know what happened to their family members once they crossed the point of no return. They don't know what happened to them. I was with men in the crew today who had never seen actual images, photographs of enslaved people in the Americas. And because they were like, is this a real photograph? These are the real people? And it's like they're not being taught what happened, what the Europeans did, because of course not. Because it's like in the same way that Europeans are in denial and don't really want to talk about it and want you to shut up, right? In the same way that they're in denial, the same way that they didn't want to teach it. Like in America, thank God there's so many African Americans, because even today as we speak, there are school districts that are attempting to paint this barbaric, disgusting, brutal, demonic slave trade as expat workers looking for jobs in the US. So it's like they want to try to rewrite history, to try to paint themselves in a better light, to wash clean what it is that they've done. And so they have not taught the brutality that they enacted. They've not taught it. And it's still not being taught in the schools here. And I think it's high time that we brought the two, that we bring these nations together to really teach what happened. And, you know, so there's so many of us who are like, oh, enough already of these slave movies. They don't want to see slave movies anymore. But these slave movies are important because there are people who don't know what happened. I'm sorry. There are people who don't know what happened. They don't know the truth. They don't know the sickness that existed in these human beings that would enact that on other human beings. They don't know the barbarity. And so Roots and the other movies that have come out, and Django and all of these movies, and it's like, some of us are like, enough already, but this is a story that needs to be told. And people need to see and not look away, and people need to own up to what it is that they have done and what it is that they are continuing to do to try to sweep this under the rug. Anyway, listen, I'm gonna get out of here. Well, the tipsiness feels like it's mostly gone, but I'm still gonna take my shower, jump into bed, and call it a night. Listen, thank you all for coming out and watching this video. Sorry I couldn't be live and we couldn't interact live. This has been such a learning experience for me today, and I feel like I need to write in my journal and just emote and express and just get everything out and use my affirmations workbook. Christmas is coming up, and there's still time for you to get your self-love affirmations workbook off of Amazon. I feel like the thing is backwards. I'm gonna have to fix my camera. Get it on Amazon and have it delivered to you. The affirmations workbook. It helps you rewrite your subconscious programming. It's an amazing book. And today, when I was attacking myself, like with the negative self-talk, I just combated it with the things that I have already been writing out in the affirmations journal. So like when those thoughts tried to creep in and tried to attack me and talk about how fat I looked on camera, my belly looked so big and all this other stuff, I just pushed all of that aside. And I concentrated on the affirmations that have been so deeply embedded into me, because I've been doing this book for a few months now. Actually, these are the affirmations that I used to help me rise out of the displacement when I was living in my car. So nonetheless, thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next video. Tonya TKO, and I'm out. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications to see whenever it is that I'm jumping on and coming live. Peace.